to all of you, and welcome to the 46th Leadership Levers Lecture by Srinivas Rao Mahankali, popularly called as MSR. And before I introduce him, he and his team have been doing phenomenal work at T-Hub, which is the topic for today's discussion, that is T-Hub and entrepreneurial ecosystem. And let me also have the pleasure of introducing Mr. MSR or Mahankali Srinivas Rao. He's the Chief Executive Officer of T-Hub. Also, is an MBA from IIM Bangalore. He's an accomplished serial entrepreneur. He has scaled businesses across geographies over his 35-year stint in the IT industry. At the T-Hub, MSR is committed to pivoting around the 6 M's, which he's going to talk about, that is money, market, motivation, manpower, mentors, and methodologies, and 2 P's, partnerships and policy advisory framework. He leads its mission of driving results and collaboration for entrepreneurial success. Before T-Hub, MSR served as a Chief Executive Officer of GAME, that is Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, and co-founded Aujas with seed funding from IDG Ventures. At the start of his career, MSR also worked at Sonata, Computer Vision Labs, and Microland. And he, at his helm of T-Hub, they have recently created a world's history. That is when they opened the world's largest innovation facility. And like I said, he and his colleagues have done phenomenal work in widening the horizons of startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem in the country, especially to do with Telangana. And it's a very interesting model. It's a triple helix model of innovation where there is a nice, wonderful collaboration between academic institutions, especially 3 academic institutions based on Hyderabad, IIIT, ISB, and NALSAR, and also the private sector, and most importantly, the government. So it's a very, very interesting combination of how these 3 participants or stakeholders come together to boost up the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the country in general and in Telangana in particular. And he's going to talk to us about how he and his team have doing a phenomenal work in T-Hub and how T-Hub has been widening the horizons of entrepreneurial ecosystem in the country, like I said, in general, especially in the case of in the state of Telangana. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. First of all, thank you, Dr. Chaudhary, for the introduction. Much appreciate the opportunity from TimesPro to present the audience. It is obviously hard work for many to do this on a Saturday evening, so appreciate all those that have joined. And I'm going to try and give you a quick overview of what we are doing in Telangana. I'm assuming the participants here are from across India. So obviously, I think what I'd like to do at the end of this all is hopefully you'll take the message back about how an ecosystem gets built and how hopefully it can be replicated in your states as well over a period of time. Yeah. So I'm going to just quickly try and share my screen. I hope you can see it. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can. We can see it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me start with a little bit of background about how T-Hub came into being, etc. I think that's important for you to get an understanding of context and so on. Right. So as you know, Telangana is the youngest state in the union. It was formed back in June 2014, and we regard ourselves as a startup state in many ways. And like every startup, we are nimble, we are agile, we are passionate about what we want to do, and obviously we want to move Telangana forward, both from a innovation as well as from an entrepreneurship perspective. So what we've done as in Telangana over a period of time under the leadership of, under the visionary leadership of our Chief Minister, Mr. K. Chandrasekhar Rao, popularly referred to as KCR, and also the Minister for Industries, IT and Municipal Administration and Urban Development, Mr. K.T. Ramarao, also referred to as KTR. We have created a string of pearls, to drive the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem in the last 8 years. We'll talk at length about T-Hub, quickly giving you a quick overview of the other entities which are involved. So one is an entity called TSIC. TSIC is the Telangana State Innovation Cell. So one of the things you will notice, right, even today, while we have 120 unicorns, etc., most of them tend to be coming from large cities, tier 1 or in some cases tier 2, but predominantly tier 1 and a small number coming from tier 2. So one of the things the government realized is we must focus on trying to democratize this whole concept of entrepreneurship, not make it restricted to just an urban phenomenon, but also there are many interesting grassroots impact-led innovations which are happening, which may not necessarily lead to businesses becoming, unicorns, but they solve significant problems, significant issues for the public good. So essentially, we have 33 districts in Telangana, and TSIC's mandate and charter is to see how we can bring up, local impact-led innovation, for example. And second is also focus on, creating an entrepreneurial mindset among young people working with schools and colleges, right? The second entity I'm going to talk about is VHub. VHub is essentially India's first state government supported woman incubator for woman-led entrepreneurship, where typically businesses, have to be 51% plus owned by women. And as you know, today, for example, just about 11% of our businesses are led by women, which is clearly something which needs to change. So we have focuses on both tech and non-tech entrepreneurship, again, across the state. The T-Works, which is actually a very interesting concept. It's essentially a rapid prototyping facility. It's a maker's lab where essentially anyone who's building something, so for example, as we know, predominantly a lot of our focus has been around services, software, and platforms, and so on. But India clearly, particularly in the light of the recent, we have had two black swan events in the last 2 years. One was the pandemic, and of course, the other is the geopolitical tensions because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So clearly, there's a need for India to to focus on becoming more hardware, start producing more hardware in India. The whole Atmanirbhar piece, right? So T-Works is essentially a facility where you can come in, you have 3D printing equipment, you have CNC equipment, you have equipment for working with wood, metal, leather, textile, etc. So anyone who wants to build something, be it a drone, be it be it an EV, for example, or even a rocket. And I will talk a little bit about one of our startups, which actually built, the prototype for the rocket was actually built at T-Works. I'll talk about that later. We also have an entity called RICH. This is the Research and Innovation Circle of Hyderabad. This is essentially, in Hyderabad, we have more than 40 institutes of national importance. We have 12 defense labs. We have several, high quality institutes in the life sciences space. For example, the Center for Molecular Biology, the National Institute of Nutrition, similarly, the Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, right? Then we also have high quality agri-led institutions like ICRISAT, then the National Institute of Agriculture and Rural Management, etc. So how do you bring innovation from lab to market? One. Second is, how do you, for example, the focus areas for RICH are around sustainability, healthcare, and mobility. So, for example, in the healthcare space, we have 14 large corporate hospitals in Hyderabad. So any medtech startup or health tech startup which needs access to these hospitals for clinical validation, for trials, for data, etc., RICH helps actually facilitate that. Right. So that's about RICH. Task is an entity which is focused on bridging the gap between academia and industry, essentially in terms of, as we know, many times the academic curriculum does not necessarily keep pace with the needs of industry. So, for example, if you're looking for people with analytic skills or blockchain related skills or AR, VR related skills or metaverse related skills, those are usually hard to find from colleges. So they do courses, they work with about 700 colleges across Telangana to focus on building bridging the gap between academia and industry, right? So that's about task. Emerging tech is essentially how does government leverage the value of all these technologies in improving government to citizen, government to business type of services. So just two quick use cases. So for example, government uses blockchain to monitor, chit funds, which is a form of peer-to-peer lending, which is very popular in the South. And, so one of our startups, a company called Chitmox, has built a solution which is deployed by the government to monitor and manage chit funds. Similarly, if you take drones, many of our startups which are doing interesting work in the drone space, drones are being used for crowd surveillance during large events. They're also being used for delivery of vaccines in remote areas. They're also being used for forestation. They're being used for agricultural spraying, etc. So there, the government directly contracts with startups on a single, bilateral basis without going through cumbersome tendering processes requiring the startup to have, net worth and revenue criteria, which is usually obviously hard for startups, right? So that's the ecosystem, and T-Hub is obviously at the epicenter of all of this. What we do at T-Hub is supporting startups. We put together, one of the questions we get asked is, what exactly do you do to support startups, right? So we put together this framework. We call it the 6 M's and 2 P's. So the 6 M's are, the first one is around market access. So clearly for every startup, the biggest challenge they have is how do you acquire customers? How do you basically make it easier for them to get in front of potential customers or prospects? So we work extensively to help startups connect with corporates, with government bodies, with defense, etc., to be able to get to a stage where there is a potentially at least a POC, and hopefully in some cases orders as well, right? So that's the first M. The second M is of course money or capital. So clearly, so most startups usually get started with bootstrapping, and then subsequently need to raise some angel funding, or potentially go out and get some micro VC or VC led funding. So that's something which we actively focus on. We support. We put together a very strong angel network. We actually run a program called T Angel to connect startups to angel investors. We also monitor a couple of. We have a couple of funds which we administer and run. So we have something called T Fund, which is a Telangana government-led fund. So far, we've done 6 investments between 30 lakhs to 1.5 crores with that fund. We're also part of the Startup India seed fund, where again we've done a fair number of investments. We also have access to grants from various central ministries, from defense bodies, etc., which we work with the startups to facilitate access to money, right? And we also run a investment banking network, where we work with startups to connect them to. We built a network of over 40 plus investors across India. So we work as an investment banker against a success fee to facilitate access to capital for startups. So that's the second M. The third M is around mentoring. So clearly, every startup, even somebody like Steve, even Bill Gates has a mentor called Warren Buffett, whom all of you know. So obviously, every startup also needs strong mentors to support them, to guide them in their journey. So we put together a 200-strong mentor network who can support the startups. And the fourth M is around manpower or talent, where typically a startup, once the startup starts to scale, you probably need, in some cases, you need entry-level talent. In some cases, you need lateral hiring. In some cases, you also need co-founder, right? So we help the startups access all of that, through running internship melas, working with colleges to, for entry-level hiring, and also doing, job fairs and so on, right? So that's the fourth part of the puzzle. The fifth one is around, motivation, mindset, and community. So clearly, while there are today close to 80,000 plus registered startups in India and 6,500 in Telangana, we also know that, if you look at the number of startups which actually get funded, that's less than 6%. Only about 4,500 startups actually get funded. So obviously, there's also a fairly high, mortality rate. So one of the things which startups can benefit from is from listening to others who've been successful, serial entrepreneurs, sometimes in some cases unicorn, founders, etc. Talk to them about how they build their businesses, take away some key, insights, and so on. Right. So that's the fifth M, and the last M is about methodology, which is we have structured programs to, essentially for depending on the stage of the journey of the startup, we have structured programs to help them evolve to the next level, and I'll cover that in a little more detail in the subsequent slides. The last two are to the two P's. One is partnerships. So partnerships basically, everything which a startup needs at an early stage, accounting, legal, taxation, intellectual property, or patent related services, digital marketing, recruiting. We've created a platform. We call it a value partner platform. So we have a lot of these entities empaneled, including several cloud majors like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, then marketing automation companies like HubSpot, CRM companies like Zoho, etc., who offer many of their services pro bono to the startup, right? To the startups, so that they don't spend valuable cash in the beginning. So, for example, Amazon gives up to $10,000 of credits to the startups on day one, and so on. And the last one is around policy advisory, which is essentially how do we work with the government to create a set of startup-friendly policies, which again I'm going to cover a little bit in detail towards the end. So this is the 6M and 2P framework, and obviously each of these we can measure. Many of these are very quantifiable because our approach is based on what you cannot measure, you cannot manage. Right. So that's a quick snapshot of what we are doing. Let's quickly look at what we've been able to do so far from an impact standpoint. We've, as you can see here, the most significant one is around the funding. We've been able to help our 1,100 plus startups raise over the last 7 years, close to $2 billion of funding, significant job creation. And I'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about some of our star startups. So, for example, many of you even across India would be familiar with the name of Skyroot. So Skyroot was incubated at T-Hub. And as I mentioned before, they built their prototype at T-Works, but the whole incubation process was done at T-Hub. And they are a first Indian player to put rockets into space. They've done what Elon Musk did. They did it obviously at a significantly lower cost, and they also happened to get it right the first time. So in partnership with ISRO, they launched rockets into space. Gayam here, for example, is a electric three-wheeler cargo entity. They've set up a large plant now starting from 2016, and now they've just recently raised 150 million round, and they're setting up India's largest electric three-wheeler cargo plant. They're also exporting to other countries. Banyan Nation is a social impact entity which works on recycling plastic, and they were recently again, since this is an ET event, during the recent ET Awards in Bangalore, they were awarded the best social impact enterprise. Paymetrics was acquired by Muthoot, and then Adanmo recently raised 112 crore round from Zomato. Adanmo is in the outdoor, what is called OOH space, display boards in apartments and other public locations. So this is just to give you a flavor of what we do. So as I said, more than 1,100 startups across 50 sectors. So agri-tech, food tech, med tech, health tech, fintech, logistics, then horizontal technologies like blockchain, AI, ML, etc. And of course, several deep tech and SaaS startups. Significant number of startups in the D2C as well, which is now becoming an interesting space. Similarly, new age startups in the gaming area, the metaverse area, the Web 3.0 area, etc., are also part of our many of our cohorts. Right. So that's a quick snapshot of what we are doing there. So in terms of market access, since I mentioned it, as you can see from the numbers here, facilitating. We also help them not just with government connects, but also with access to we work with, we pair with other accelerators across the globe. So currently, for example, we're working with an accelerator in the Bay Area called FalconX. Then we have an exchange program with GINSEP in Germany. We also are working with bringing startups from other markets to India. So, for example, with Latrobe in Australia, their startups which are looking to access the Indian market, we provide them access. Similarly, with the city of Hiroshima in Japan, and we also done some work with Korea, right? So this is just to give you a sense of how we help with the the market access part of things. I talked about methodologies, one of the 6 M's. So I thought I'll just cover that a little bit here in detail. So basically, as you can see from this chart, we have a number of programs, tightly curated programs, depending on the stage of the startup. So for example, if you are at an idea stage, and you need to really figure out whether it's a go, no go, whether you should actually go out and build a business. So we have a program called Masterclass, which is essentially about helping you get some understanding of the market size. Now, whether the problem you are solving has already been solved by somebody else, what is your potential, competitive differentiator, what is referred to as a moat, etc. So that's what we do in the Masterclass program. We also have a program called Rubric, which is a design program. So essentially, one of the things we've seen with many startups, particularly those who are building products or either hardware or software platforms, is they don't pay too much attention to design in the beginning. They just start building, and then they realize later on that either aesthetically or technically, or from a safety angle or from a user experience perspective, the platform they've built doesn't stack up. So this is a program where we cover things around design, UI, UX, technical architecture, scalability, and so on. The Lab 32 is our flagship program, where basically it's a business readiness program where we help startups which already have some traction, 4 to 5 lakhs a month run rate. We help them with things around, product market fit and GTM and so on. And then Trestle is our program for startups which are looking to go global. I talked about the angel network as well. And you can see the numbers, on the right in terms of how many programs we've done, how many cohorts we've done, and how many, how many startups have been part of that, right? And obviously, there's a large community as well, right? So this is the startup from a manpower. I talked about helping them get access to manpower. So a number of our startups are already in the space of building solutions for assessment, for video assessments, talent assessments, etc. So we rope them in and leverage their solutions. So for example, we ran a fair about 2 months ago, and 73 of our startups hired 334 interns as part of this, right? Mentoring I talked about. So we draw mentors from across the board, typically mostly entrepreneurs or at least C-level executives who support the mentors across this wide range of domains which you can see here in the below, fintech, agri-tech, and so on. Yeah. And community events, a large number of community events, because obviously, as I said, the biggest thing in entrepreneurship is about role models. It's about making the whole thing about believability, that someone who's also not necessarily coming from is typically a first generation entrepreneur and doesn't come from a family with a strong business background can go out there and build sustainable, scalable businesses. So we do a large number of community events where we bring in VCs, we bring in other elements of the ecosystem, corporate leaders, successful entrepreneurs, etc., to talk to the startups. Yeah, so that's the motivation part. I talked about policy, so I'll just spend a minute talking about this. So we worked actively with the state government to build out policies across 22 domains. So this is probably one state which has done this significantly over a period of time and very consistently. We also have policies, in terms of fiscal incentives for startups. So, for example, if there's a startup which is registered in Telangana and hires, let's say starts to onboard people, the first month's salary, a significant portion of the first month's salary is reimbursed by the government. There's also something from a GST standpoint. So GST, as you know, has two components, the state GST component and the central GST component. So they get the state GST component is reimbursed. Similarly, if you file for a patent, domestic or international, you get some part of the fees which you incur towards applying for a patent, that gets reimbursed. If you take part in a trade show outside India to promote your product, platform, or service, some part of that gets reimbursed. Plus, if you grow at 15% year on year, also you get a performance bonus type of thing from for the first 3 years this applies, right? So that's a quick look at policies. I talked about partnerships. So we have several partners, both within India and outside, to helping startups which are looking to grow global. We partner with international accelerators, etc. And I thought I leave the floor open for questions, because this version I have done this sometimes in 10 minutes and sometimes I've done this in 2 hours, right? But in the interest of time, I thought I wanted to have more interaction and not have it as a one-way monologue, right? So happy to pause here and take questions.
Thank you, Srinivas. I think we do have quite a few questions. Let me start with the first one. And the first one is from Mr. Ashish Moitra, quite a big one, but let me read it. Respected sir, thank you for one-to-one framework T-Hub. So need to know the following. You made the development in a quantitative and structured way, bridging the gap. You measure the development of urban society, but how do you measure the development of unstructured society? That's one. The second one is, what about urban-rural tie-up? That's the second one. Third one is organized sector, academia, government, and industry, but how do you measure the type of unstructured economy? And then you mentioned startups, one to many, also they are in the threshold phase. Is it too early to take the pie?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part, please?
You mentioned startups, one to many, also they are in the threshold phase. Is it too early to take the pie?
Okay, I'm not sure I understood that question. Maybe I'll ask a clarificatory question. So 2 parts. So I think the first question was around unstructured society and about urban rural type of thing.
Yeah.
So obviously, as I said in the beginning, if you recall, I said we have put together a comprehensive framework to cater to all kinds of entrepreneurship. So obviously at T-Hub, our focus tends to be more tech-led, etc. Having said that, one of the things we are doing at T-Hub now is also, in the government of Telangana has set up 5 IT towers in 5 districts of Telangana. For those of you from Telangana, the names of Khammam, Karimnagar, Mahbubnagar, Nizamabad, and Warangal will be familiar to you. So these are IT towers. So basically, we are trying to get IT not to be restricted only to Hyderabad, but also to go to other cities to avoid crowding in Hyderabad, etc. So what we are doing is we are creating a hub and spoke model for T-Hub. So for example, if there are entrepreneurs in these districts, right, they can actually come in and work out of one of these towers. And all our programs are now designed to be phygital, meaning some physical presence in the beginning and maybe sometimes in the middle and obviously at the end. But a lot of programs are done virtually online, right? So that's one part. The second is, as I said, the other ecosystem which we built, including, for example, TSIC, where the focus is on working with, we have a program, for example, it's called Intinta Innovator, right? So in Intinta in Telugu means in every household, how do you promote innovation, right? So for example, there's a class 9 student who's built, for those of you who have an interest in gardening, we use, plastic, to put those into pots. So she's actually built a biodegradable pot, right? So which can be used instead of plastic, right? So we have several startups in sustainability. We have several startups in the what we call the water, sanitation, hygiene. Several startups in the recycling space, waste to wealth as we call it, etc. And the intent is that we need to have the right amount of beyond the point. Entrepreneurship cannot be regimented. Innovation will come when ideas get commercialized, right? So our definition of innovation is there are ideas, but you have to figure out how to commercialize them so that they can create impact at scale, right? So that's what we are trying to do. And and maybe Dr. Chaudhary, if you could repeat the last question, I'll try and answer that again.
Sure. His question is, you mentioned startups one to many. Also, they are in the threshold phase. Is it too early to take the pie?
I'm still not sure I've understood the question.
Right. Maybe I'll ask Ashish, please, if you can rephrase this one and re-articulate if it's possible. That will be great, Ashish. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one. This is from somebody, one of the participants, Srinivas. And his question is, hello, sir. I have one idea. We have small team of engineers. How can we approach T-Hub? What will be the selection criteria? How will financial things work in a T-Hub? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So what we do is, every month, typically it happens on, I think, the third Thursday of every month, we have something called an idea open house. Okay, so where anyone who has an idea, who's thinking, saying, listen, I want to build whatever it could be. I want to build a SaaS platform. I want to build a satellite. I want to build a, I want to build an electric vehicle, etc. Somebody who has an idea, for example, can come into the idea open house, right? So where we get people to come in and talk about their ideas. So we ask them, obviously, this is more, they talk to us about the idea. They're, we have our mentors present there. So they ask them a few questions to understand how much clarity of thought has gone into that idea. And then if we find at that stage that there is something, there's merit in what the idea is, we'll get into a deeper discussion, right? We'll get into the next stage, etc. And then the third stage after that is, if we think, after a deeper examination, then we can put them into the program we call, which is called a masterclass program.
Okay.
Which is a typically 3 to 4 month engagement, where the whole idea is to, spend a lot of time on fleshing out the idea, so that when they start hitting the ground running, the lead time to build out something is significantly reduced.
Absolutely. Okay. So is there any, just a follow-up question, Srinivas, is there any a link or an email that, I think most of the people are asking about it. Is there any way that they can reach you?
So you can go to our website. Plus, if you can follow us on, we are active on all the, social media channels. So we are active on LinkedIn, we are active on Twitter, we are active on Instagram, we are also active on Meta. So just follow our pages, and, all these programs, the details will be available there. Of course, you can also look at our website.
The next question is from Mr. Saket, and his question is, how do we get access to all T-Hub activities, and is there any way we can see all the calendar events? Thank you, Saket.
So again, our website. I think we just launched a new website. So maybe at this point, maybe the calendar is still not there, but it should be there fairly soon, definitely before the end of the year. So just look it up, and then most of our events, whenever we have an event, we put it out, for example, as I said, on LinkedIn or Twitter. So there are links available for you to register. So you can just, click on the link, basically to share your name and email ID and number, and then, you're in. You can come in, and we don't charge any entry fee for the events. All the community events, there's typically no entry fee. Obviously, for the programs, there is a small fee, but nothing for the events which we charge.
Good. This is the question from Mr. Pawan Kishore. His question is, we are from agribusiness looking for funding for our startups. How to approach VC and the T-Hub for our requirement? Thank you, Pawan.
Sure. So what you can do is, we have something called a funding desk. This is basically a team which works with the VCs, etc. So first of all, what we want you to do is to, you can send your deck to something called contact@t-hub.co. So this is a central one email ID, so that it doesn't get dropped, because otherwise we get a lot of emails on a daily basis. It helps us to track who's writing out for what. So that's contact@t-hub.co. You can send in your initial deck, whatever you are comfortable sharing at this point in time. We have a funding desk team which will look at that deck and then set up a time to get into a detailed conversation to understand it a little more. And then if we find that there's an appropriate fit. Sometimes we'll come back and tell you, looks like you're too early, for example, or the idea is, unlikely to get funded because it seems to be, you either underestimated the challenges you're going to have in being able to build a business, or it's a very crowded space, and whatever you're trying to do is also already being done by, let's say 20 other people, right? So it's going to be hard for you to raise funding for a very Me Too kind of idea. So that's what it is. So please write into contact@t-hub.co.
Can you repeat that, Srinivas? I'm just trying to type it for the other.
Contact@t-hub.co.
Yeah. So thank you. So this is the question from Mr. Anand Jaiswal. His question is, hi, mostly startup in early stage, they struggle and fail. How does your 6am framework evaluate and guide to proceed? Thank you, Anand.
Sure. So I think, so as I said, right, one of the M's I talked about is methodology, right? So, we do believe that if you put the startups through a structured engagement methodology and it's really more about, it's not a set of lectures, right? There is obviously some lecturing, but it is about asking the startup to do specific things. So for example, in a 4-month program, right, there are specific milestones which are drawn up for each individual startup, and we ask them to work towards that. So basically help them, for example, many times startups, let me quickly, the fundamental question we ask every startup is, first, do you have clarity on what is the problem you're trying to solve? Okay. First of all, is that problem important and does it need to be solved? That's the second question. Third is, what is the way you think you're doing, which makes, the solution which you're going to build to solve that problem unique or different, right? Third is, do you have a clear execution plan? Fourth is, do you have a clear way to monetize, in the sense, can you demonstrate that whatever you're going to build, finally, of course, there are social impact enterprises, etc. But again, our audience also, of course, focus is not so much on the NGO side, but typically for businesses for profit, or you might call it in some cases profit with purpose, right? Sort of thing. So we ask these questions, first of all, what is the problem you're solving? What is the nature of the problem? If you solve that problem, what kind of an impact are you likely to make, right? What is the solution you're thinking about? Has the solution, what level of testing, prototyping, etc. have you done to validate your hypothesis, saying that whatever you're going to solve the problem with has some legs in it, if you get what I mean. And then, what is the size of the market you're going to solve? How do you make money? Okay. How do you build a team? And how do you scale the business? These are questions which we keep asking all the time.
Great. Very interesting, Srinivas. This is the question from Mr. Manik Kaul, and his question is, hi, I'm interested to connect with health tech startups and mentors in T-Hub, but not able to connect via LinkedIn. Is there any way that I can contact
T-Hub? You can connect with me, drop me a text on LinkedIn, and my, the same name which you see here, Srinivas Rao Mahankali, T-Hub. You can drop me a text and I'll make sure somebody reaches out and connects to you.
Thank you so much, Srinivas. I think that's a great, very gracious gesture from you, Srinivas, to Manik. And this is the question from Mr. Madhukar Sandhi. And his question is, we started service-based company 6 months back in embedded domain. How can I expand?
Okay, go out and get more customers. How you can expand?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I hope. So obviously we need to understand a little bit more about what you're doing. Okay, because when you say I'm doing services in embedded design, in embedded systems, it's a very large area. So I think it may be hard for me at this stage, without spending time with you, to understand what you're doing exactly, to figure out. But obviously, a simple answer in any particular thing is, when particularly in services, the services, when you're building a services business, I think there are two aspects which are critical if you want to build a large scale services business. One is what I call expertise, and second is efficiency, right? So when I say expertise, why is it that a customer should come to you and not go to somebody else? Do you have, is there a deep capability you've built, which is very hard for somebody else to, demonstrate or replicate or show? That is one. Second is, in many cases in services, it's about being able to do this very cost efficiently and effectively. Right? This is obviously a very high level answer, but I can only obviously, unless we get into a deeper conversation, it'll be hard to be more precise. But these are two questions, which I keep asking all service startups. What is it that you are doing, which is, where you can say you have deep expertise, and the second is how efficiently are you doing it?
Great. So this is a question from Mr. Neeraj Mittal Srinivas, and his question is: can a University of Uttar Pradesh take benefit from Telangana?
Absolutely. We are working with other, as you know, as part of this national education policy, a number of incubators have been set. Colleges and universities are incentivized to set up entrepreneurship cells. Sadly, many of them are dormant because they really, are not necessarily appropriately staffed, etc. So we have a program for colleges. Where one of the programs we have for colleges is a program called Kickstart, where we are working with a number of colleges to make the college incubators effective. So essentially, we work on a build, operate, transfer model, where how does a college set up a incubator? How does what kind of programs can be offered to students? What kind of challenges can be run? What is the appropriate staffing model for that? And how do you measure outcomes? All of that is part of Kickstart. And then we have another program called which we Launchpad, where at the end of the program in the colleges, we identify potentially 50 plus students who have an entrepreneurial mindset, right? And ask them to go through a challenge, right? And then identify potentially 4 or 5 of them, where potentially some of them can be built out into a business. So happy to help. Our mandate, while it is on Telangana, but we have a larger mandate of helping the whole entrepreneurship ecosystem across India. So we'll be happy to to engage and see how we can help.
Thank you, Srinivas. This is a question from Mr. Venkatesh Juluri, and his question is: hi, we're a startup in e-commerce consulting with a small team and are in scale-up phase. Ideation or a few clients buy-ins have been successful. Looking for tech help to scale, and at the same time, I'm also looking for a couple of interns who can work on a few concepts for a few months. How do I reach?
Same. Please write to contact at t-hub.co. So both we also have several. We have several of our startups, many of whom have got to some level of maturity, which are building what we call no-code platforms. Plus, there are some startups who do what we call OPD, outsourced product development. So, which means you have an idea and you want them to help you build it, they can. And of course, I talked to you about the internship Mela. So, take part in the internship Mela. We're happy to help you get your interns.
Thank you, Srinivas. I think one last question for today evening is, I think Israel is been known for a long time and continues to be known as a startup nation, Srinivas. Now, what are the specific lessons? Because if you see in India, I think, of course, we have done a phenomenal job because startupindia.gov.in and all that. I think the recent reports have shown that, we have seen almost close to about, if I'm right, I think based on the answer that was in June or July 2022 in, I think, Parliament, where we have noticed that, we have seen almost about 15,400% increase in startups between 2016 and 2022, where I think they have risen from 471 to close to about 2,993 kind of startups. Now, that's a number, actually. But then we also keep hearing some wonderful stories, or maybe some little not so pleasant stories about fact that 90% of the startups actually fail, kind of thing. So therefore, from that point of view, what lessons do you think we can learn from a nation like Israel, a very small country, but then they have been able to put and together very, very formidable entrepreneurial ecosystem, so much so that some of them are there, and most of them are there in the some of them actually gone on to win the the Nobel prizes as well. I think definitely it is also risen to a lot, given rise to a lot of innovation as well. So from that perspective, what kind of lessons do you think we can learn? Maybe one or two.
Sure. So they say necessity is the mother of invention, right? So when you are a small country like Israel, surrounded by not necessarily friendly neighbors, right?
Or style, yeah.
For a hostile neighbors for a long time. So usually for example, there, I think the whole what they call the military industrial complex, right?
Mhm.
Plus academia have come together to start with. So Israel, for example, as I said, one is the military industrial complex is about solving, defense related issues. One. Second is Israel is also in a relatively arid area, right, where rainfall is less, etc.
Exactly.
So obviously a lot of development in agriculture, things around hydroponics, etc. As I said, necessity is the mother of invention, and that's what they've been able to do. So the very strong, tight linkages between academia, between industry, and between the defense forces has led to a spurring of innovation. In India today, I think we are starting to see that there's a lot of work to be done yet between
Exactly.
bringing all these different players together, which is government, industry, academia, media, industry bodies together to work together in a cohesive way. I mean, again, I'll share one number with you. So there is, just like we have an ease of doing business index, we also have something called an innovation index. Right?
Okay.
So India is now ranked 41. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It has gone up 45 places
Okay.
in the last 5 years. It used to be around the mid 80s. It is now 41, right? But there are many smaller countries, very small countries, which are ahead of us. And I think it's just a question of working together. As you said, startups, you talked about a humongous increase, in terms of
Exactly.
numbers. So it's just a question of working through it. I think we all recognize today that innovation and entrepreneurship are completely tied to each other. And, hopefully many of the people who are listening to this will go back, reflect, and come up with some great ideas and build, scalable businesses.
Sure. I think with your permission, I'm just having two questions, I would say. One is a follow-up question. Now, in India, also, there is a lot of talk about are these startups actually get on with the bandwagon and then start chasing the, what do you call it, the valuation game, Srinivas? Because I think somewhere, I think it has become almost like a fashionable kind of thing. That's what we get to read quite often about, being unicorn and the lesser time kind of thing. So therefore, is there any such they're chasing that kind of very very maybe a warranted or unwarranted race kind of thing, being in the valuation game?
No, so clearly, right? As I said, when you think about it, let's say 78,000 plus startups, about 4,500 of them get funded. Many of them do not get funded, so they're essentially bootstrapped. So valuation is one metric. It is a good metric to have because it shows that there is significant activity. And I think more importantly, if you look at in the last, let's say 10 plus years, about close to $130 billion of capital has come into India, right?
Yeah,
From overseas.
exactly,
Right?
exactly.
So it's a good measure of obviously people don't put in money from outside unless they see, that potentially down the road they're going to get a significant return. So that's one part. Second is, to some extent, some of the valuation thing is getting corrected now. As you can see, compared to last year, now funding has come down a little bit because obviously now all investors and founders are also asking themselves, what is the path to profitability? You can't keep endlessly burning money and not making, showing at some point that you'll start to turn a profit, right?
Absolutely.
So whatever we are going through now is good for the ecosystem.
Sure.
I think companies will become a little more, little
Gosh.
more cost conscious, a little more nimble, a little more agile, and come out of this current situation far better than they were, before this. See,
Great.
too much liquidity is also not good. Not having
Absolutely.
money is bad, but having too much liquidity is also not good.
Good. So, with your permission, Srinivas, I'm just taking two more questions. This is a question from Mr. Mohammed Sohail, and his question: Hello, sir. I have planned for utensil washing service where I have designed product for service. Uh, Service. Can T-Work, T-Hub will help in building up the product? Thank you, Mohammed.
Yeah, absolutely. Get in touch with us. You got the details here, the contact at thub.co. You also have my LinkedIn thing. Please send on both or one of them at least a note on what you are trying to do. And then obviously we'll have a conversation, understand what you are doing. And if there is obviously deep merit in the idea, we'll be happy to support you to take it forward.
Thank you. This is a question from Mr. Divakar, very interesting one. Dear sir, could you share your experience on bringing a failing or just born startup back in its riding path, and what T-Hub programs they really benefited from? Any such offline programs hosted in other states as well? Thank you, Divakar.
Sure. So during the pandemic, right, the last 2 years, right, so actually life has been obviously difficult for many startups, particularly for startups which were doing things. So I always, ask startups to look at whether what they are doing. Suppose a startup is trying to build something, right? Please always put yourself in the potential customer's shoes, right? So, and I'll explain that to you. There's a simple framework which is actually used in, it used to be used in inventory management. It is called ABC analysis, and there's a variant of that. It is called VED, vital, essential, desirable. So first ask yourself whether whatever you're building, is it something without which a customer cannot, I won't say survive, but cannot run his business, cannot run some specific issue, on a sustainable basis. So is what you're building either vital, is it essential, or is it desirable? So if something you're building which is desirable, okay, desirable means, for example, I would also say, like, I want to build something like Elon Musk as an example, right? Now, let's look at what's the potential market size for that. What is it going to cost? How am I going to be able to demonstrate my path to making money, etc. Right? There are a few, Kairoot, for example, but not many who can do that, right? So I think the first question you should ask yourself every time you're thinking of building something is, go back to the same basic, very fundamental question. What problem am I solving? By solving that problem, whose pain do I reduce? Okay. Do I do things cheaper, more efficiently, differently? Is the innovation I'm doing incremental or disruptive? Those are the questions you need to ask, right? And to answer that specific question, during the pandemic, we ran a program. Many of our startups had to pivot. They had to, for example, I can't name the startup, but there was one startup which was doing something in the AR, VR space, right? And obviously, in AR, VR, unless you can actually physically get in front of customers and show them what you're doing, it's hard to imagine the experience, right? So they actually pivoted, and now they become a very successful HR tech talent assessment platform.
Absolutely wonderful. And this is not a question, Srinivas. It's I think a wonderful, sharing of his experience with you. This is from Venkatesh Chillara, and thank you, Mr. MSR. Every time that I participate in your session, I only get encouragement and impressive experience of ease of doing business with T-Hub and the Telangana state ecosystem. And you are providing optimism always to pursue the entrepreneurial journey. Thank you, Venkatesh, and thank you, MSR.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's it's a short span of time. I think it has been a very big canvas. I think I'm sure many people who have attended, and also these people who could not attend today, because we're going to share this link with them. I'm sure they'll be thrilled as well as enthused to start looking at the alternative lens of entrepreneurial ecosystem. And most importantly, thank you and congratulations to you and your entire team for putting up such a very vibrant system. I think all of us heard about for quite some time, your Y Combinator and all that, and everybody is to always, if you look at many startup, the unicorn startup founders now, they have been part of that. But I think it has been a long ask system as to how do you get to see that kind of thing in India. I think what you and your team have done is definitely you have actually grown this one much beyond Y Combinator and the entire ecosystem. Congratulations to you once again, Srinivas, and thank you so much for giving us time, especially on our Saturday evening. And look forward to hosting you for another bigger session in the months to come, Srinivas.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary, and I'd like to thank TimesPro for giving me this opportunity, and of course, thank you to all the participants for staying through this session. Good luck, Godspeed, onwards and upwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you.